So in this tutorial, we're going to be looking at text purposes as part of our revision for GCSE English Language. Typically, this question appears in Unit 3. So what are text purposes? Well, PISA, the Programme for International Student Assessment, have provided definitions for text purposes that candidates for GCSE English Language need to be aware of. So we have 4 different text purposes: personal, public, occupational, and educational. So the PISA definition for a personal text are texts that are intended to satisfy an individual's personal interests. So they are specific to one person. For example, a letter, piece of fiction, a diary entry, text messages would all count as personal texts. Public texts are those that relate to activities and concerns of the larger society. A public notice, a news website, and so on. Occupational texts are related to work or the workplace. A job advert, a guide to how to work in the workplace would count as occupational. And then finally, educational texts usually have the specific design for the purpose of instruction, textbooks, learning software, and so on. So in an examination, you might be presented with a text. So in this case, you've got a report on safety in schools and colleges, written by the Association of Teachers and Lecturers, the ATL. And it's important here not to read the text in too much detail, but to skim and get a general gist for what the text is stating. You'll then be presented with a question, which asks you to tick the box that best describes the purpose of this text, and you've got the 4 definitions. Now, initially, you might think that this is to do with schools, which is to do with education, and to tick that box. But you need to really be careful, because the text here is a report on safety in schools and colleges. And it talks about how people need to work in the workplace. Therefore, in this case, what we are dealing with is an occupational text, because it's giving advice for teachers. If you look at the mark scheme, it says award 1 mark for occupational use, and then we've got the clarification that whilst the content of this text is about education, its purpose is not educational. It is a report for educationalists, or teachers in other words, relating to their jobs. Thankfully, most of these questions perhaps won't be as tricky as that one, but you need to be aware of those types. So in this case, we've got a recipe for breakfast. A recipe gives instructions, therefore the text's purpose is educational, because it's trying to educate you, in this case, on how to produce a simple breakfast. We've then got a job advert for a head receptionist. If we think back to the text purposes, it's to do with the world of work, therefore this text is occupational. Moving forward, we've got a BBC News article here. BBC News website is accessible to the public, hence the public text purpose. And finally, we have somebody in the process of sending a text message, which of course is a personal text. That's a recap then of these text purposes and their definitions.